So you're walking through a bookstore looking for that awesome new book series you heard about. You don't know where it is, however, so you wander sort of blindly through the aisles trying to find it. One of the aisles you walk through is the comic book aisle, and you look at some of the titles. Some of them look interesting and the art looks gorgeous, but nah, they're just about some dumb superheroes, you think, and you move on. Now, most of us know about the superhero kind of comic book, but most of us don't know about the history of comic books or the other kind of comic books that might exist. I've been reading comic books for years, and I actually don't really like superhero comic books, so I'm pretty familiar with the other kinds. I'm going to talk about the history of comic books first of all, and also some of the different kinds of comic books that exist. The Japanese had comic books, sort of, in the 1700s. They were woodblock prints, which look sort of like this. Ta-da! And were bound together in book format, sort of like a print and then type, as sort of a comic book. In Italy, there were fumetti in the 1800s, which are sort of satirical or funny strips that are printed in newspapers. The first comic book that appeared in the United States was called The Adventures of Obadiah Oldbook, and it appeared in 1842. That's according to Don Markstein of Toonpedia, a comic webpage devoted to comic books. It's actually a translation of a comic book by a Swiss man named Topfer. Mr. Scott McCloud, author of Understanding Comics, calls Mr. Topfer the father of modern comics for his contribution to American comic books. Since then, comic books have been developing until, 1938. Superman appeared. In 1939, Batman appeared, and the superhero genre was fully established. But it's been a long time since 1939. Things have changed and different comic book styles have emerged. True crime and horror, for example, were developed in the 1950s, and during the 1950s, comic books were huge. They were extremely popular. According to Malcolm Willits, Walt Disney's comics and stories sold close to 3 million copies in 1 month in 1953. That's crazy. Will Eisner, during the 60s, the term graphic novel was coined, and Will Eisner used it to describe his book, A Contract with God and Other Tenement Stories. Now, a graphic novel is not exactly the same thing as a comic book. They're a little deeper, a little more mature, often have more detailed art, are not published, monthly or weekly, and have longer, more complicated plot lines that often deal with bigger topics. A graphic novel that's used as a very good example is Mouse by Art Spiegelman, which talks about his father's experiences as a Jew in a Nazi death camp using mice and cats. Another graphic novel is Sandman by Neil Gaiman, which explores different topics, including love, rejection, death, change, free will, personal responsibility, and a whole host of other topics. They are not so much the mere entertainment, superhero comes dashing in, saving the lady sort of books, Another kind of comic book that has developed is a manga, they come from Japan. They are often pretty thick. They also have complicated plot lines and their own very particular style of drawing, which sets them apart. They are usually much simpler style of drawing, but the plot lines are still complicated, and they are categorized according to their target audience. Shonen, for example, is targeted towards guys, and shoujo targeted towards girls. There are different kinds, obviously. There's some targeted towards adults, and some targeted towards a specific kind of plot line. Yeah, that's about it. Those are just some of the kinds of comic books that have come out of comics' long and varied history. Some of them are really simple stories, some of them are short stories, some of them are really long or complicated, some of them are, for adults, and some of them are for children. But at any rate, there's a huge variety and a huge variety of artistic styles as well. It varies from really simple styles to really complicated, detailed, gorgeous art styles. So, next time you're in the bookstore looking for that book, you might want to stop by the comic book aisle and just check it out, see if you like it. Thank you for listening.